we should always be ending moving people's emotions. And I don't think people always spend enough time thinking through that. My heady day is always the middle. That's going to be the meat of the program, and it's going to be a lot of thought. But I want to make sure we leave on that high emotional note, and we start on a high emotional note. It's heart, head, heart. We're starting with a 1% GDP head start.
Guarantee. Almost.
It's a head start for the year. And then you've got this economy that's just kind of blowing behind it. That's why I'm optimistic about the economy. If corporations are healthy, our industry's healthy.
Absolutely.
If corporations slow down, we're all hurting.
All right. Hello, Mike Dominguez. I've been looking forward to this interview.
Hello. Thank you for the invite.
Welcome to Event Planner Confessions. We're very excited to have you here today. You are a wealth of knowledge. You have been a voice in this industry for many, many years, and we're excited to talk today a little bit about sort of, the big idea of the economy and where things are going, because I think you have such a great take on it that's so relatable.
Yep.
And you make it, really granular for the event planner to understand. And we are Event Planner Confessions, so we want the event planners to understand what's really going on in our world. So given that it's now 2026, give me the high level, what we should be looking at in 2026 from an economy standpoint, and what we can expect and how the future looks.
Yeah, the one thing I'm always challenged with is that there's so much noise. And one of the things that I continue to stress last year is, unfortunately, one of my most requested slides of all time now is an all sides media bias chart.
Yes.
And I continue to show it updated because it does change.
Okay.
And the 2025 is very fascinating because some of the positions of certain media that used to be far left have now moved into moderate left, and some that used to be in the middle have now moved either left or right. It continues to move. But the one point of that entire chart is that where we're getting our information as a narrative, the challenge I have is that the narrative sometimes is hiding what is really good because it is sometimes unpopular politically to say the economy's good, because that's like giving credit to the current administration versus the economy's good. And the one thing that has helped me in my career, I separate policy from politics.
Okay.
I care about the policy
Right.
because that helps us run our business. That helps us tell us what's happening.
Right.
The politics is whether you like the people or you have this issue. I don't care about any of that. I only care about that when I'm voting for somebody. Outside of that, I care about policy. And the reason that matters is I don't think we're mentioning, we've had 3 consecutive quarters since Q1 of GDP growth that is over 4% or right at 4%. The Atlanta Fed just adjusted their anticipated Q4 2025 to 5.1. We haven't seen 5.1 in 15 years.
Wow. Okay.
And that tells us some things are working in the broader economy. We had the largest trade deficit, or the smallest trade deficit in history back to 2009.
Wow.
But nobody's talking
about it.
that.
Why is nobody talking about it?
Because it would be giving points to the current administration.
Wow.
And this is my point. I'm not trying to give them points. I'm trying to say the economy's working. And by the way, when all of this started and the chaos that was created last year with tariffs, when everybody was freaking out, it's the one thing I kept telling my wife. They're either going to be really right or really wrong. There is no in between. Right now, it's showing that they seem to be pretty right. And that should be a positive for all of us to say, if we have a tailwind coming into this year because of economic policy, that's a positive. The other thing is, I think we have a year of getting used to every day is going to be chaotic with this administration. There's going to be another grenade thrown in the middle. I think we all forgot. We saw 1.0. We were all shocked, and 2.0 looked like 1.0. We forgot the pace, the phonetic pace that we're seeing right now. I think that's going to be good. We're getting comfortable with it. We're getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Right, we shouldn't be surprised by it.
Yeah.
And, one of our taglines is expect the unexpected.
Yeah.
And I think it leans into that perfectly, right?
You know what's always expected? There's going to be another tweet that's going to throw us all
and
sideways.
And then it's going to be unexpected again, exactly.
And we're going to have to deal with it. But we kind of got used to it, or we kind of got unused to it. And now we're getting back to it. So all of that, I think, is a positive. And then I think what isn't being talked about enough is the big, beautiful bill that was passed in April. And every time I say that, I go, I'm not saying it's beautiful. That's what it's called. It's not my name of the bill.
Yes.
But the big, beautiful bill that was passed in April, tourism economics scored it to actually increase GDP by 1% in 2026, and then 0.75% in 27-28. What does that mean? We're starting with a 1% GDP head start.
Guarantee. Almost.
It's a head start for the year.
Okay.
And then you've got this economy that's just kind of blowing behind it. That's why I'm optimistic about the economy. And I just think there's too much trying to be negative instead of looking on the outskirts and saying, you know, actually things aren't that bad. And there's this separation that I think is really interesting right now between consumer sentiment and what we're seeing in consumer spending. You know what we're seeing? People aren't feeling really good, but they're spending like crazy. Well, maybe that's just our new norm. We're not happy that everything's more expensive, but what that also tells us is we're kind of missing the point that wages are still outpacing inflation, which means we can afford it even though we don't like it.
Right. Even though it's scary to see those numbers,
that's the differential.
Have been set up for success.
And there's one other piece that's kind of moving that's going to be, I think, the big push for next year, because we've had this bifurcation you've heard me talk about, I'm sure, between luxury shoppers and bargain shoppers. The one thing that has really changed right now is rents are plummeting in the major cities. That is healthy because most renters are falling into the bargain shoppers. And what's happening is less of their discretionary income is now going to rent.
And they can
as rents are starting to come down in all the major cities. They actually spiked, but in 25 of the major cities, they're all dropping. And Austin, for instance, is dropping over 20%.
Wow, that's a huge
drop.
It's
a huge drop. But that is a real benefit for those that were struggling from a consumer, because the number one expense when you looked at CPI was shelter. It was either homes or rent. And with that coming down, it's going to bring down inflation as well. So that all of those pieces put together, I'm really excited about the year.
So how does that affect the event planner? So how does that affect someone that's planning a meeting? How does that affect the hoteliers out there? I know you're with ALHI, and you know the hotel perspective is really important.
Well, the biggest thing is if hotels are healthy, that's going to be good for the experience when you're in a hotel.
And then you're getting serviced well.
Exactly,
right?
Because you can afford the service because we have continuity of guests in the hotel throughout the year. The one thing when I talk about the economy, when the economy is healthy, corporations are spending and corporations are meeting. And corporations meeting are healthy for all of us. And that's a positive. The American Express Meetings and Events Survey that just came out, it was for North America, it was a 91% optimism about our industry. But more importantly, 95% increasing budgets. That's a positive.
Finally,
yes.
The budget increase is matching what the inflation and everything else is doing.
Well, I don't know if it's matching, but it's at least it's going up.
Are we getting closer? Are we closing the gap a little?
It's at least not going negative or staying flat.
Okay.
You know, there's a positive.
The flat was getting to me, I'm not going to lie. So.
I know it is, and it's a hard one, and I don't know if stakeholders are quite prepared for that. All of those pieces are telling me that's healthy. If corporations are healthy, our industry is healthy.
Absolutely.
If corporations slow down, we're all hurting. It doesn't matter. So that's why the economy matters to me, because the meetings industry. And then there's this one little data point that people haven't been paying attention to. But we've had more CEO turnovers in corporations literally than any time in history over the last 3.5 years. The reason that matters, and that's very positive for us, every time you have a new CEO, they bring people together. They want to get their message out. They need to get everybody going. And there's nothing that brings that together like bringing people together.
Absolutely.
Nothing that can accomplish it.
Talking about it right now at our own organization.
That's it.
As we've gone through our merger.
So that is the perfect example. So think about literally in the last year, 1,600 CEOs switched.
Wow.
So think about how many meetings that is producing that were on the sidelines or not even in anybody's vision.
Right.
So that's in addition to an already compressed environment. That's why I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and do you think that's, I mean, obviously that has to do with the baby boomer sort of retiring out?
It's not the retiring.
Really?
It's people are tapping out because the pressure to execute. And if you're publicly traded, unfortunately, you get activist investors, and they have their own wish list, and they're going to drive it a little differently. And that's what changes. And then even when you have transitions like you just had, somebody's out at some point. You have two heads, and even if they last for a while, even if they stay on for a little bit, it's just part of mergers and acquisitions. That is not at all an indictment of any company or any industry. That's just the way it works. So you're losing people immediately off the cuff, but the average tenure is so small because there's so much pressure to execute, and it's monitored on a daily and monthly basis. That's why there is actual great debate on whether public companies should be reporting out to Wall Street monthly or quarterly. There's this big debate going on that we're almost sharing too much information because stocks gyrate with things that really shouldn't matter month to month. It should matter quarter by
Quarterly.
quarter.
Yeah.
And then yearly. But because we mentioned month to month, everybody is now managing their organizations to that. That's where you have people just tapping out saying, it's not worth it.
And what do you think that does for like the growth for individuals? Because I know, as you see that movement on top, you see a lot of opportunity for people, right?
You do, but you also see people saying, I don't know if I want that. And, and if you look at some generational trends,
Yeah,
I think
I love that stuff.
Yeah, what I think is really fascinating, what nobody I'm an Xer.
Yeah.
We are the forgotten destiny generation. We're the ones
You're
nobody
not wrong.
talks about. No, you talk about boomers, millennials, Z. What about X? We don't ever.
You're smaller.
No, yeah.
You're a smaller group in size.
Guess who has 50% of all management jobs in the country today?
Xers right now.
Xers.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, we're smaller, but we're mighty.
Yeah.
Because
and you
we
hold a lot of
actually-
decision-making power.
That's the point, and we are the forgotten generation.
Wow.
And there's a lot of generational research, and I'm not saying this because I'm an Xer. We're the last generation that had to figure it out. And there's a lot of resilience in the Xers because we were the first latchkey kids. My generation was the first to come home and not have a parent home.
Yeah.
So we called it latchkey because don't lose the key because mom gave it to you. And
Yeah,
you had to get
you
into
have
the
to get
house
in.
with some way. It really was a different generation that way. And what I'm finding right now is that's completely overlooked. That 50%, and I read the stat, I was unaware of it until I was doing some research. 50% of all management jobs are Xers. Zuckerberg's an Xer. You think about Elon is an Xer. They're not boomers, they're not millennials.
Yeah.
They're in the Xer category.
You're right. Some of the
So-
most powerful people.
Are
Xers.
leading these major companies. So
Yeah.
and I find that fascinating. But then when I look at Z, I'm excited about because they want to meet face to face, and they're if you looked at generations and you went back, the matures, the silent generation, the greatest generation, the ones that fought World War I and II.
Yeah.
My grandparents. As an Xer, I related more to them than any other generation. Millennials and boomers, very similar. And you grew up in very similar environments because millennials grew up in a great economic climate. So did the boomers. It was this massive growth that everybody had, relative peace overall. You look at the Xer, and I grew up in the 1970s when we had the highest rate of inflations. I mean, I was just a kid, but this is what our parents
You
were struggling with.
experienced it, yeah.
And we grew up in the threat of nuclear war, always.
Wow.
Because it was the cold arms race with Russia. And we all thought, there were movies being made about us getting blown out off the planet. And literally, we never thought we were going to live to see 20s because we were going to blow. We used to have drills for, literally
Oh,
for
I've
a nuclear bomb. And how stupid are the drills? Get under your desk.
I know,
That ain't gonna
how's
help
that gonna save
anything, by
you?
the way. I'm like,
seen
can I go
that.
outside and watch the fireworks show? That would have been a better use of my
Right?
time because I'm going to
Go
be
out
gone
slowly.
either way. But then I look at Z, and it's interesting because Z is a lot like Xers. Because if you think about Generation Z, they grew up with friends and family that were impacted by the Great Recession and then the pandemic.
Right. Well, and the pandemic thing is really impactful on the Z's.
Especially on the face-to-face side. I hired a young 23-year-old, and whenever somebody starts in the company, they do an onboarding down in Dallas, and I always take them to lunch, just me and them. So I was taking her to lunch, and then she goes, Mike, what everybody forgets is 4 years of my schooling was virtual. Like, she wants to be in the office 3 days a week, and she comes to the office 3 days a week, and she wants to be face-to-face. And she was telling me, that's not unique. It's my friends. That was all taken away from us.
Right. And they also tell me, the ones on my team, they say, I need help with my social skills.
Exactly.
Teach me, because I never got the experiences that you got to be able to, walk into a party in college and meet new people,
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
And so it's the same thing as walking into a networking event or, an industry moment or any conference or meeting that we plan, right?
I could not
they
agree
just
more.
don't know how to socialize in the way that we came up, having a totally different experience.
Yeah, and I think it's the one thing I keep preaching is that we don't spend enough time thinking about the human engagement in our meetings. As far as how do you plan for human engagement, and one of the big trends I continue to push, and we execute it in the meetings we do, is you need more white space on a calendar. And there's
That's
too
where
many.
the magic happens.
Yes, but there's too much there's too many agendas that we're going to go from 8 to 5. And I'm like, this is my push with everybody. If you want them to be present when they're present, make sure they know they've got 3 hours in the afternoon to go do whatever they need to do.
Absolutely.
Because then they'll be present while I have them, which is much more effective than me saying, I'm going to have them for another 3 hours. but they've had no time
they're
off. But
exhausted.
they're on
and they're on their
the
phone and they're
devices.
exactly. They're
They're
keeping up their
answering emails, have to step out for a phone call. But if I know I have 3 hours, and you know, we have an event coming up on this Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and it's a perfect example of it that I have a whole bunch of stuff planned for Wednesday afternoon while everybody gets to go play because I know I have that time open. But that means I'm doing nothing but the meeting until I get to about 1 in the afternoon. And from 1 to 4, I can catch up, and then I'm back checked in with the event starting at 5 o'clock as we start into a social aspect of it. So.
And what about all the other kind of moments in the meeting for human connection? I think there's a lot to be said for, you know, everyone pig piles everything into the evening events, right? They're like, oh, that's where we network, that's where we meet each other. And it's like, no, there's moments of connection through every portion of a meeting.
Yeah, and you know, we've always made breaks around food instead of, well, why don't you just let the breaks be more around conversation, which means you need longer breaks.
Mm-hmm.
I've
and
got
a little bit of structure.
Yeah.
A little bit of structure, right?
Well,
because some of the Gen Zers are asking for structure. They don't know how
I'm 50-50 on the structure because, yeah, again, I'm the generation that figured it out.
And that's why I'm coming at you with a little structure, right? Because I'm a millennial and I come from it with, I want to, you know, I want to have you meet the Gen Zer and have something commonality. And I don't know that it's going to happen organically anymore.
And I don't know if it's impactful if it's not organic.
See,
because I find the greatest relationships and the greatest ahas, they're the Gen Zer that hunts me down and said, I need your time.
Yes.
Those
and then you're more likely to give it to them because they've worked for it.
But those are the ones that really want it.
Yeah.
Because they hunt me down. And that's why I say I think there's a balance between how much structure and how much of it is organic, because the people that are going to get the most out of it are going to get the most out of it. And those are the people I like a little more unstructured because it tells me who I need to keep an eye on in my company, because those are my go-getters. The people that don't need the structure and they just go do it.
And that's how we got to where we are as a millennial, right? You know, I got my first job in the DMC world because I was walking around in a networking event. It was actually for Meet Boston, which was the Greater Boston CVB at the time. And I was a member and I was working for a clam bake company. I was a caterer. And I walked around the room and I said, who wants to, you know, eat lobsters tonight, basically, and you know, different words. And a woman said, I've been watching you all night. I need somebody that can come work for me, that can do what you just did, can work a room. It's a skill set that not everybody can do. And, you know, turns out it was for DMC. I was literally my dream job. I never knew existed. I never looked back, you know, 3 acquisitions and mergers later, here we are, you know, and as, you know, a C-level role in the organization, right? So because I was able to have that skill or work that skill and somebody noticed it, and to your point about an organic way, it worked out for me.
Yeah, I think there's a benefit to that. You know, me as a leader, I'm watching. And when I'm watching, that's why I like it to be a little more organic, because I watch how people act when there is not that structure, and how do they move? How do they interact? Because the people that just stand in the corner, they're never going to be my go-getters.
I know, and you're never gonna call them when there's that next opportunity. So, I
like that. That's an interesting because you're the perfect example of it. And I'm laughing because I bet the person that spotted you was an extra too back then.
Oh yeah, she was. She absolutely was. Yep, she's still doing it. So, so I did want to ask like a couple of very specific questions, you know, for our planner audience. And, you know, in talking about spend and inflation and growing their budget, they have more money. What are they going to waste it on versus actually use it wisely?
I don't think they're wasting it. They're needing it. Here's the positive. Airfare's been moving backwards. So when you're looking at an overall budget, they're going to be saving in that regard. Growth is now moderated. Hotel rates, food and beverage. Food and beverage has moderated just a bit. I think the one thing planners forget, because we keep looking at the food and beverage costs, is almost 70% of food and beverage costs is labor. And labor is still growing at 4%. Because somebody asked me, well, if you're telling me food's only growing at 2, should I only budget a 2% increase on F&B? I go, no, you still need to be at 4 because my wages are going up on average 4%.
And you still want that service level to be what your expectations are. And exactly.
Yeah, no matter what, that's not going to change.
Exactly.
But that's always kind of left out of the equation when we're thinking about food and beverage, and the majority of the cost.
Because you used to have that slide with the cheeseburger, right?
And that was like your most just the food.
Yeah, and that was your most requested slide at that time frame, and it was just talking about how you broke down a cheeseburger and, you know, why each of the items, you know, had a variance of cost and why they grew.
Exactly.
Right.
So here's the good news: a lot of those items are coming down.
Okay.
And that's the beauty of it. Beef, the one thing I can tell you, stay away from beef.
Okay.
If you're trying to save money, because beef is through the roof and it is not slowing down. Beef is the fastest growing item out there. It's very expensive. You're going to see it. You're going to see it in any kind of pricing, but you have a lot of other items that are coming down, either moderating or starting to decline slightly. So that's a good thing. But people just need to be aware of that. If you're trying to have a beef meal, you're going to pay for it.
Okay,
Because-
perfect. So that's something to think about when, as regard to how to spend that, like maybe slightly bigger budget that you have this year. Don't spend it on beef. You could probably get a lot more value out of something else potentially.
Yeah. And I do think, I think there is this thought process, and we keep having conversations with planners around really production. And when I talk about the production side of it is, what is your need versus what do you have to have? The want versus that need is, I think, kind of the issue we're having, because people see these splashy displays and they want to do that. And if it doesn't have an impact and it really doesn't matter,
hit their goals and objectives,
then why are you spending it there versus spending it in other areas if the budget is limited?
Right.
And then I also look at that by size, and if it's a rollout, you want to be splashy. If you're having a sales meeting, doesn't need to be, and you can do, and I know this is your forte, but you can do a lot with lighting and other aspects without spending a ton of money on the production side of it. And we really have to think through that, because I think it's gotten to a point that, we have to have the real sexy. And I'm like, well, no, that should be substance. And the sexy should be more in the engagement when we're all said and done. So it's this balance. Your bigger groups, they've got the budgets. But for those groups that are really struggling with it, I think they have to start making some choices.
And what I'm hearing a lot is people are adding new meetings that they never had before, right? And to your point earlier about the CEOs, they're hosting their meetings, but also really even in the association market, they're looking at where's their new places that they could, get a more of a niche demographic and target them with something more specific and tailored to what they want, right?
Exactly.
So you have to find a whole new set of funds to create that moment and make sure it's impactful. So
exactly. And companies are making the investment, going back to why am I excited the economy's good? Because they'll keep investing.
Exactly.
If they'll do that. But I think people are trying to make choices. And one of the things I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about on the food and beverage side is we haven't spent enough time around menu architecture and menu design over the life of the program. And it was an aha in one of my past lives. We were doing a food waste study. And what we found doing that, we found how to not waste food as much. But I was an old banquet manager. If you're doing American breakfast, we do a BEO for the American breakfast. Our chefs, they know 100 people. I know how many sheets of eggs I'm doing. I know how many sheets of bacon, how many sheets of potatoes. What we found was you're 3 days deep into a meeting, and you have fed everybody every hour and a half, they don't eat as much the last day as they did the first day.
It's way more than they eat at home.
Well,
and in most cases.
And we haven't changed the menus. And I'm like, and you're usually on that last day, you're coming off a gala dinner that was probably 8 to 10 hours ago. If you have an early flight, it was 6 hours ago.
Yeah.
My point is simply, that's a great day for a continental breakfast or something that's grab to go, and then spend that extra money on the gala dinner or in other places. And then think about that last day leading up to a gala dinner. Your lunch should be really light.
Right, because you're going to have this really great...
And I've been feeding you for 2 days.
Yes.
And you're about to have this big dinner later in the evening. That should be a really, really light day. That's a great day for a Caesar salad, for instance.
And speaking of sort of the architect of sort of the event structure and kind of how to line up your time, I was listening to a podcast recently about how it's so important to make a big impact at the end, because people remember what happens at the end of the event much more than what happens at the beginning. So if you spend all of your money on your welcome reception, by the time they go to leave, there may be something little that happened that is way more memorable to them and could shape their whole entire experience and how they look back at that meeting.
Well, and I also would add that to content. Like we are really insistent. I know you know Christy Allen, and Christy.
Yes, I love Christy.
Christy and I spend all the time on content. That's what we control in the event.
Yes.
And the one thing she knows, and I have this mission, is it's heart, head, heart. And we should always be moving people's emotions. And I don't think people always spend enough time thinking through that. My heady day is always the middle. That's going to be the meat of the program, and it's going to be a lot of thought. But I want to make sure we leave on that high emotional note, and we start on a high emotional note.
With optimism,
Yeah.
right? Along the way.
Yeah, one of my favorite speeches of all time was Jimmy Valvano, and it's the Jimmy V Foundation on ESPN. You probably see it. They raise money for cancer. You're too young, but when he won the award, it was the first Arthur Ashe Award, and he died 90 days after receiving the award. He had cancer that he was fighting and barely made it through, but he gave one of the greatest speeches you'll ever hear. And it's one of the things I look at that from our meetings to say, it's that same thought process. He always said there were 3 things you needed to have a hell of a day. And he said, you need to spend some time in thought, you need to spend some time in laughter, and you need to move your emotions to tears. He says it could be joy or it could be sadness. He goes, but if you do that every day, he goes, that's a hell of a day.
It's a hell of a life.
It really is. And that's how I look at our meetings.
Yeah.
We should move you to laughter. We should spend some time in thought, and we should move your emotions to tears.
Wow.
And if we do that, we've nailed it. And that's kind of my filter when we look through that. It's my filter for life, but it's actually my filter for the meetings as well.
I love that. Well, I've been noticing something on you, and I have to ask. Tell me about the pin you're wearing, because it's definitely got a message to it.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I wear it everywhere I go. You'll see it in every picture. It's our own. We created. It's a big X that says "End it now," and it is our mission and our commitment to ending human trafficking, which right now estimated 50 million people are trafficked around the world.
50 million.
50 million.
Wow.
It is happening in your backyards. It is happening in everybody's neighborhoods. It is modern day human slavery. And
this is how you move them to tears, by the way.
This is it. And you know what's funny? When we're part of PAC, so we signed the code, which means we will educate at every opportunity. That's why we're educating here. But what's really interesting is that I now show a picture, and it's me with a picture. We won the Freedom Award from PAC for our work we've done. And when we were receiving the award, I promised that I told them I'm making a commitment that I'm going to make people uncomfortable everywhere I go, because we're going to talk about human trafficking.
Yeah, and it is uncomfortable.
It is. But I showed a picture because I said, people sometimes ask me, why are you so on this? Like, why are you so all over this? One, I don't know how you can't be. Many of them, or most of them, are females, and I have daughters. And
you're in an industry full of women.
You're like, wait a minute. It's why we don't get more outraged is beyond me. But I took a picture, and now I show it, and it's a picture of me and Faith Ramos. And Faith Ramos is on the Survivors Council of PACT. And the fact that the Survivors Council is as big as it is is really appalling, because we shouldn't have that many survivors of trafficking, but we do. And I show that picture because I said, let me tell you about Faith Ramos. She was trafficked between 14 and 17 years old. The first time she escaped, she had her jaw broken so badly, she was in a hospital for 2.5 weeks. She finally escaped at 17 and started a foundation to help others that are literally surviving trafficking. I said, you know why it's personal? Because it's personal. Yeah. I've gotten to know somebody personally that had it. And when you start to meet the human beings, and I think that's what's hard for people to attach to, because they haven't seen it. We talk about it, and it's hard to get your head around it because it's so horrific, but it's a challenge for us today. So that's why we wear this. And yesterday was National Human Trafficking Awareness Day. We're part of the Red Sand Project. I didn't bring my red sand. I was going to bring it. Really cool promotion or promo that they're doing. They're giving away bags of red sand, and your job is to fill it in cracks on sidewalks, because these kids keep getting lost between the cracks. And it's to bring awareness around the country. So it's putting red sand inside of sidewalk cracks around the country that people are doing this. So, but thank you for asking. That's the passion behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I've had the pleasure of being at a lot of different industry events where that is talked about.
It is.
And it's important. Yeah. So
we're making progress as an industry. Definitely we are.
Good. Well, let's change our emotions for just a second and move to our laughter. And it wouldn't be Event Planner Confessions if we didn't ask you for one of your confessions from any event that you've been a part of. And I know you go to so many all year round.
Well, I'm just going to share my own. We've had 2, but we were having our, we have these executive exchanges. They're our largest client events we do. So we were in the Dominican Republic. I've got our resident DJ that goes with us everywhere. She's up there. She's got the room jamming. We've got great energy. We're 10 minutes beforehand, and then it just gets quiet. And I look at her, and she's like, and there is no sound. We've lost all sound in the room. We're about to start in 10 minutes. The doors are opening. Oh, not open. Everybody's in the room.
Oh.
They're sad. We're about to get going. And I'm back there, and then it becomes the joke of, okay, how many technicians does it take to, because they just keep getting more. And I'm like, guys, more people isn't going to fix the problem. And before I got on stage, I had to figure out what was going on. And basically, long story short, we lost the soundboard. The
Wow.
soundboard fried right before you're going to go on stage. And then I went up to the plant, and we always tell the planners, we always try to teach. We use it as a laboratory. So first I get up and I go, I'm loud enough that I can talk to the room. And I said, we're having an issue. What I don't know right now, they're going to try to fix this one. It might be 15 minutes, or we may need you to wait for 40 minutes. And I go, we're bringing in champagne. We're bringing in food while we're waiting, but we may have to replace the soundboard. So we'll be running about 40 minutes late. And then I go, but I know my part. So I go, and I put up like a video I was going to show them. So here was a video I was going to show you. And all of a sudden the sound comes on, and it was like the Minions. They were like, yes. And then it went off, and they went, oh, and then yes. And oh, and it just kept going. And they were teasing me because I just kept going with it.
Yeah.
Like I would start talking.
You're riding the roller coaster, right?
So it went on, and then I'm like, well, here's the video. And then it went off, and I go, well, what I was saying was, and then it went on, and then I would just keep going with it. And at the end, we had to replace the soundboard when it was all done.
I bet.
And I did tell the planners, lesson learned, the extra soundboard should be in the room. And I go, and I promise you, the first time you ask an AV company to do that, they're going to say, we've never lost a soundboard. I honestly can say I have.
Yes.
So I'm going to say, I don't want to hear that because I've lost a soundboard.
You haven't until you have. Yes. That's how it all is.
Make sure there's another one.
Yes.
And then personally, the biggest flub up that I've had probably in a long time, I'm at a conference, and I was invited by the CEO of this company to speak to a bunch of investors. And I made my own mortal sin that I actually executed my own mortal sin that I never do, because they were supposed to be talking for an hour. I wasn't supposed to go right up, but I don't read emails when I'm doing that. Well, it's going long enough. I start looking at my phone, and I'm reading a couple of emails, and then I'm in my own head. I get on stage and I start talking, and the person who invited me was a gentleman named Jimmy. And I keep referring to a guy named Alex, who isn't in the room because there is no Alex.
He was in your email.
Yeah. He was in the email.
No.
And then I look, and then all of a sudden, about halfway through it, I'm like, I know it's Jimmy. What the hell was I doing? And then I start mentioning Jimmy's name, and everybody's like, boy, you were really talking Jimmy over and over and over.
Because whoever that Alex guy was, he was out.
And he came back on stage, and he goes, that was wonderful, Bill.
Yes.
He goes, I don't know who the hell this Alex guy is. And everybody was rolling. And then, at the end of it, I went to dinner, and I'm like, Jimmy, I am so sorry. And he's like, he goes, you have given me comedy for the rest of this conference.
There you go. Exactly. Lean into those moments, right? Because we're all human.
And it's like, it bugged me for about 3 hours, and then I got over it. Because
and then you started laughing with them.
Yeah. It's like,
laughter is an important part of the day.
Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And I'm always talking about perspective, and I'll leave the audience with this, and it's a true story that, you know how we survey, and the meeting planning community is one of the top 10 most stressful jobs in the United States. I told my daughter this, my 34-year-old daughter, and she knows our industry well. And I was telling her about the survey because it had just been out. And she looked at me, and she's like, oh, did I mention my 34-year-old daughter is a nurse on an oncology ward? And she goes, seriously, Dad? Seriously?
You want sympathy from me?
Seriously. And she goes, seriously, you're telling me that's stress? And when I share this now in presentations, I do get laughter in the room, because I'm like, it's perspective. And what my daughter reminded us is that, very simply, if she makes a mistake that day, somebody dies. If she has a bad day, somebody died.
Oof.
If we have a bad day, like my soundboard goes down, we ate dinner 40 minutes later in the Dominican Republic.
Champagne.
It really is. And today at the airport, we were a little delayed. And I'm talking to the agent, and I'm like, these are first world problems.
Yes.
I do keep this perspective, and I watch people lose their minds, and I'm like, these are first world problems.
No.
And
that's why we do these confessions, I think, because it is perspective.
It really is. And I think we just need to have better perspective as we go through the year.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. I just really appreciate everything that you shared with our audience today, and I just appreciate all that you do for our industry. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the invite. This was fun.
Yes.
Thank you.